Buenas noches, mi gente. Welcome back to Found in Translation Talk Show, the talk show that stacks truth on politics and today's hottest issues, and in this case, historical, a week that will live in my estimation and infamy. This is yours, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining the show. Found in Translation Talk Show, formerly Ray's Latino Talk Podcast, is the longest-running, continuous, Latino-led podcast touching on politics and today's hottest issues. And who better to discuss today's hottest issues than my longtime co-host and friend, the prodigal daughter herself returns, Shakira Yaya Rivera. Welcome back to Found in Translation, sister.
Yes, thank you so much, Rafael, for having me. Just to be clear, I want you in my life just to introduce me to the room when I arrive. So, kind of like welcome to America. I just need you to go with
I am the human megaphone horn. Some would say, I at one point dubbed you the Brock Lesnar.
Brock Lesnar, yeah, I remember that.
But your sabbaticals have taken you to another level of infuriating excellence. I'm now dubbing you the Sade of Found in Translation because only Sade can leave for 5-6 years at a time and come back as she now recently has done with yet another banger in another era. I'm just glad you came on so that we caught the marriage. I didn't want you to have gone with the marriage and then get divorced or something so we're still in the honeymoon period. Congratulations, Yaya.
Thank you.
Into your boo.
Thank you.
And let people know, where they can let people know. Well, first of all, Yaya, we've got an incredible show because later on the show on Found in Translation, we appreciate everyone watching. We're going to have Frederick Velez. Let me tell you something, who's going to talk to us about. We sent this Puerto Rico Yaya to Iowa.
I know, I saw that.
To make sure the Sabor Boricua was in the Iowa Caucus con maíz. And he could tell us not only about the fracaso that took place, which we'll talk about later, but also how him and his group of Power for Puerto Rico is inserting the issue of Puerto Rican policy into the national discussion. In moments, we're going to have Yamelisa Taveras, who actually was at the State of the Union, even though it was the state of the cult. But that she was there advocating for some very important issues that impact all of us in around healthcare. She's going to be on in a moment. Yeah. This is always great to see you and have these conversations with you and our Found Translation community, especially since this is also the beginning of Black History Month, which is very significant to our Found in Translation family.
Yes, so honestly, thank you so much for having me on as always, Ray. And yes, happy Black History Month. This is such a big deal. I feel that those of us in the Latinx communities have to also embrace our Afro-Latinidad and, really embrace and represent our culture because there is such an African influence, the African diaspora, the history of Puerto Rico, the Afro-Caribbean, Central South America, Mexico. So there really is a footprint in many of our hearts about how it is to feel and look, part of the African American and Black community. So this is really exciting. I'm excited for both of our guests to be on. I mean, I can't wait to ask Frederick, how was it being one of the few Puerto Ricans in Iowa? And, I'm so thrilled to be here this evening. I look forward to so many, to discuss all of these topics. I mean, it's such a big deal. The State of the Union, the Super Bowl, Shakira, J-Lo. I mean, I'm all here for it, Ray. So thank you so much.
There was so much going on, and I want to thank Brianna Cortez, the first person to give us a shout out on the channel. So definitely, Brianna, if you have any questions, you can of course join us also in the chat here. So if you're watching this either on Twitter, Facebook, any social media platforms, feel free to add your comments. And I put in the chat now the link where you actually can join the show, and our first guest is in the queue. We're going to get to Yamelisa Taveras in a few moments, but I want to get to some of the political headlines. For my money, this might be one of the most important weeks in our nation's history that we've lived through. So I know there's a lot of questions that are on the minds of our Found in Translation community.
So the impeachment trial. So, Ray, I was going to call you before you even invited me on the show because you are like my political guru. You're like my Siri / Google when it comes to this. So what does the Trump's impeachment acquittal mean for our country? And with everything else that's going on, I need your expertise. I need you to guide me, please.
Well, it's funny because oftentimes when we speak on these issues, the other side and others believe that we're being dramatic. And there's nothing hyperbolic about the fact that, this moment definitely requires more than ripping up some pieces of paper. Because outside of, fatal issues, 9/11, which is always in our hearts and hit all of our communities very hard. If you want to go back to Pearl Harbor, obviously, outside of when precious lives were lost. If you just talk about pure political historical moment in our lifetimes, this, I would argue, is the worst. This erosion of our democracy and our constitution and our rule of law, just because he's a very powerful bully man, is a real sad statement in our country. So I think this is one of the saddest chapters in our history, an attack on our constitution. And it's very clear to me. People talk outside of the mouth. So one time we want people to get along, but at this point, there's no time for that. Right now, we have to focus on not only winning in one election, but having a political electoral mandate around the country to really squash this movement, because this movement doesn't particularly care about the Constitution, certainly has a very strong white supremacist tinge, and very dangerous for our country.
So I do have a question for you. I did read an article today that it was mentioned that there was an open forum where Republicans were being transparent in the fact that they voted this way because out of fear. Like, how does that translate to the American people that they were acting out of fear? Can you just elaborate on that? Like,
well, it's interesting because
our viewers, like, what should they be what should they be afraid about? You know what I mean? Like, it's your job. Like, you're literally showing up to work.
And last time I checked, they're grown men that won these positions, because they're almost all men. There's a couple white females there, but it's virtually all white men. A couple of minorities, but yeah, I mean the political calculus is, well, since registered Republicans support the president so much, then if we go against them, we're going to lose we could be primaried, we could potentially lose our seat. First of all, only a third of them are for election this year, the way the Senate calendar goes. So this is mostly a real spineless kind of vibe. I mean, this is about a lack of leadership. And there's one of the things I stress on the show. If you get one thing out of the Founding Translation experience here with Ray Collazo and Yaya Rivera and our other team of commentators and guests, members of the family, is that you gotta show leadership in your own life. And what Mitt Romney is saying, and I gotta give my man some props on that, and being transparent. Now, he is the safest politically. He's from a state that doesn't really like Trump. People in Utah actually care about their moral values and actually pay attention to what they're reading in their Bibles and stuff on occasion. These are some loopy things, but they also have some real strong character, I must say.
I need a moment for you when you're about to say something problematic.
Well, they do believe in marrying 3-4 people, but I don't know how they can afford any of that, but that's another conversation. But the bottom line is that it comes from a lack of leadership. I think there's a lot of corruption that they're involved in that we may never know about, but it's a very sad occasion. There's no question about it. Yashira, what other questions do you have for me before we get to our first guest?
So I actually have another really important question. Like, now that he was impeached in the House and not in the Senate, what do you feel that's going to bring to the election coming up in May? How's that going to affect, the Democratic Party? And how do you feel it's going to affect the overall outcome of the election?
Well, I think that I think the Iowa results, and we'll get into that later in the show with Frederick Velez III, and more deep analysis. But I think the Iowa results in this situation, I think, can make it very clear. Let me tell you something. You don't have to be a political genius to know this. If someone in your life, or someone you read on a blog, or someone that gets surveyed says, well, I'd vote for, if voting for Trump or not, it depends on the candidate, that means you're going to vote for Trump. And so a lot of people are creating these mental excuses in their head for the sort of ugly core reasons why they're supporting this man that they don't want to admit to themselves. So they make up excuses. Well, the other side's just as bad, or this one's a socialist, or this one's weak, or this was shady, or this was too young. And so they're making a lot of excuses when reality is, there is no such thing as this white moderate voter that they're going after doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. So we have to go to the coalition that elected Obama, which is now in the last 10 years has gotten bigger. There's more young, more of us. There's more, and we have to go to our base. So we're talking about people of color, like-minded white women, and other sectors of the progressive coalition. So, this idea that moderates and in rural Midwest are going to save us from this. It ain't going to happen. So we have to understand the political. I'm not saying physical, the literal. I'm talking about the political fight that we're in. We have to act like we're in a fight, because acting like we're in a debate club, we're going to get smashed.
Thank you, Ray, for saying that, because I think it's important. People really need to understand the breakdown of what's going on. So I really appreciate you clarifying it, because like I said earlier, I always call you when I have a question. So thanks, Ray.
No doubt, no doubt, no doubt. You know what? I think that you have one last question. I have a question for you, Yaya, but I think, why don't we bring on our guest? Because I think it'd be good. We'll help. She can help. She can help at the end of her interview. She could be involved in that conversation, which of course is the news that's still hitting the airways, which happened Sunday.
Yes,
of course, the Latina still making history.
I know.
Speaking of Latinas making history, I just connected with this woman on social media the last few weeks, and it's really exciting because I was able to not only connect with her on social media and see that she was representing for us at the State of the Union. Not only a Latina with incredible personal story and activist, but also someone from our community in the Lehigh Valley. So I wanted to bring her onto the stage to be part of the discussion around the State of the Union, and also a very important health-related campaign that she's a part of from the Lehigh Valley health advocate, Yamelisa Taveras. Yamelisa, welcome to Found in Translation.
Hi, Ray.
We also have Yaya, who is back. Yamelisa had an incredible...
Hi, Yaya.
Hello, Yamelisa. Hello. How are you?
How are you this evening, Yamelisa?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we have Frederick Velez in the queue, which we'll get to our next segment. But that, Yamelisa, so this is incredible, because as we're watching it on TV or we're complaining about it on social media, Yamelisa Taveras, a Latina from the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, young woman, represented for all of our communities, and was at the State of the Union. You were the guest of your local Congresswoman, Susan Wild. So can you share with us a little bit about the journey that led to you to be Congresswoman Susan Wild's special guest at the State of the Union?
Sure. So I actually met one of her local representatives from her office here in Allentown, Mariska Van Alst, and we had spoken. I shared my story with her. She had a lot of different questions just about the constituents. And as she was asking questions, she got to know a little bit about my background, my interest in the community, helping individuals that are in marginalized situations. I've been a drug and alcohol counselor now for 13 years. And that's really where, where that part started. Then I started sharing about my personal story as far as, having diabetes. And then from there, there was a story written in the morning call about insulin rationing, having my insulin pump fail and all these other things occurred. And when I got the phone call to be invited to the State of the Union, because this is such a big concern for the constituents of District 7, I was beyond honored and, of course, excited all at the same time, because you get to really rub shoulders with everyone and anyone that makes the decisions for the entire country, not just for us, not just in our district, but in the entire country. So that was an amazing, amazing experience. And I'm really, really proud to have been chosen, to have been, really selected from our community as Susan Wild's, our Congresswoman Susan Wild's guest, and be able to be there as a Latina, as, a young female, as having diabetes for all these years, working in the community, standing up for the marginalized individuals, and just all together, being able to represent all of us there, because that was my goal.
Yeah, Melissa, can you share a little bit about, because this story around the need to make prescription drugs and medications, life-saving medications in many cases, in our community, it's a big problem all across the board in all communities. Let's keep it real, even if people of means and non-minority populations, but in the Latino community, particularly acute in the issue that you're thriving through, I want to say, the issue of insulin and how that impacts Latinos that have such high rates of diabetes in our community. Can you talk a little bit about your story? And because I read about it this week, very compelling. And I'm sure you get a lot of people that respond to you, because frankly, I hear that story in pretty much every family of friends that I have. I have tias that have that story. I have other family members that have that story, other friends. I know Yaya has similar stories. So can you tell us share with the Found Translation audience a little bit about your personal journey?
Sure. I was diagnosed with diabetes, type 1 diabetes, at the age of 10. We used to live in New York, so I was hospitalized for about 2 weeks, then had to learn how to inject myself. And I was on daily insulin regimen really for the first 10 years of that, and then got switched to an insulin pump, which drips a little bit of insulin throughout the entire day to be able to basically act sort of like a pancreas, except that you have to what is called bolus, so take larger amounts whenever you eat food. However, being a child, juvenile diabetes, it's learning how to eat, how to, no longer have candy whenever you want it, how to really have to control your food, your, juice. It's not a thing that you can have. So it was a huge learning experience. And as you said, and I do identify this way, it's something that I've thrived through and continue to do so. I've been a diabetic now going on 24 years. And so many years. And it's something that I live with every day. And for the longest, I know in my conversations with Congresswoman, as we were, in her chambers, I basically had the conversation with her that it's not something that I keep in the forefront anymore because it's just my life every day. However, once I got to share my story and really listen to just how many more individuals are struggling, not because I didn't know that we have many diabetics, I knew that, but the fact that many don't know where to reach to get their needs met, who to call, what resources are available. And I already do that for my clients. So that's really what I've focused on, is whatever their needs are. I address those as far as case management, as far as being a counselor and getting them, their needs met. Most of them, of course, have what is called co-occurring disorders. So it's not only the addiction piece or the substance use piece, it's also mental health. And in addition to that, many of them are Hispanic and therefore, have the same issues that we have, health issues, whether it's HIV, whether it's hepatitis, whether it's high blood pressure, heart problems, diabetes.
So it's about like all different type of health conditions, which, is quite common in rural communities because of poverty and because of we're marginalized in many different ways. But I have a question for you. But firstly, I would like to say thank you so much for being on the show this evening. And you're in Lehigh. I grew up in Lebanon, so not too far off. So I'm quite familiar with that very isolated community, but I too am a healthcare advocate. I truly believe in reproductive justice in healthcare, and I too need, yearly infusions for my medical condition. So I understand the cost can be quite costly. So, what exactly gave you the courage, or what was like that internal flame that made you come out of the shadows and be the face of what is really a national crisis when it comes to being able to afford life-changing medication?
The last part broke. However, I believe that.
So my question was like, So my question was like, what was the internal flame? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as far as having the courage to speak, it's not that I'm definitely proud to live with diabetes, and I think it's just knowing that there are so many other people that don't have or don't often get heard. And because they're either silenced by the government or by whomever in the city, whether it's the language barrier, any of those things. That's why I feel that it is my job to advocate for those that aren't consistently heard, because their voice does matter. And I know that that's a big struggle that they have. And if I'm given the opportunity, I will absolutely take the speak on their behalf, because I think it's absolutely important to address issues that affect, especially, in such large numbers, our community.
Yamelisa, and you're listening and watching to Yamelisa Taveras and my guest host, co-host Yaya Rivera and Ray Collazo on Found Translation, talking about Yamelisa's historic opportunity to join her local Congresswoman, Susan Wild. Much respect to Susan, the good Congresswoman, who has a very large Latino community in her. in her congressional district. If you can hear me better, Yamelisa. Yamelisa, can you hear us? Okay. What you want to do, Yamelisa, you can actually log on and log back on if you've frozen. Okay. Can you hear us? All right. I'm going to put her in the queue. While Yamelisa resets herself here, glitches happen. Why don't you tell us, I know you've been a health advocate for quite some time. Why don't you tell us how Yamelisa's experience relates to some of the work you've done with health advocacy, particularly from a Latina perspective?
So thanks again, Yamelisa. I hope she can come back on because her story is really powerful. And I think it's important to hear everyone's story, regardless of who you are, where you come from, because we all come from different illnesses, right? There's so many autoimmune disorders and illnesses that require daily medication. So it's so important to talk about this. But, I started my journey when a Title X funded establishment caught an autoimmune disorder at an early stage that practically saved my life. And 7 years later, it found the same Title X funded establishment caught my sister's breast cancer at an early stage. And my sister's still battling breast cancer. So shout out to my sister, Lily. Stay strong, kid. Love you to pieces. But, it's so important to have the Title X funding and preventative health care and affordable health care for people who cannot afford it, because it is life-changing. A yearly physical can turn into a life-changing experience because you're actually being given access to typically you would not have access to. So it's really important to discuss this because we've come to a point of unaffordability of daily medication, and it truly is unethical. There's no reason why people should have to, space out and risk their lives because they're literally portioning and rationing their insulin, or people who don't go to the doctor to see whether or not they need an infusion, or people like my sibling who's battling cancer, that it's complex to afford her chemotherapy pills. It's complex to afford a lifestyle that is even remotely comfortable. And the mentality of the majority of our nation is, well, work for it. I'm sorry. Most of us who need government assistance work full time due to influx and lack of affordability. We can't afford a regular life in addition to your medication. In recent weeks, I needed a medication. They're like, that will be $423. I said, no, thank you. I'm going to go put the pharmaceutical company through hell. I'm going to call my doctor, and I'm going to have to fix this. But not everybody understands the language. Not everybody knows how to navigate the system. Not everybody knows what their resources are. So it becomes really disheartening and frustrating to know in some instances I am speaking from a place of privilege where I have health insurance, where I am bilingual, where in the past 9 years I've been able to learn how to navigate the system, but not everybody has that luxury. And it's ridiculous that we're even having this conversation when it comes to insulin and daily medication, because it is our human right. We put our money into the system. Where is it in return?
That's right. And you're listening to Yaya Rivera spit some fire with Yamelisa Taveras talking about how we need to fight going not only in this presidential cycle, but there's actually a bill that passed in the House that could try to alleviate some of this, which I know Yamelisa, H.R. 3, which I know people started putting three fingers up because the president during the State of the Union said, well, that would be 6. So let's keep it 3. But the union said, well, we're going to, he says one thing and is doing another, right? Because he says, I'm going to protect pre-existing conditions. He literally has a court case that's going to go to the Supreme Court where he's trying to knock out pre-existing conditions. He says, I want to lower prescription drug costs. Well, the House passed the bill, which your congresswoman was a big part of, and the Senate's doing nothing because they get paid off by big pharma. And one of the things that's very frustrating about insulin specifically, which I've learned in doing some of this work, and actually, Yamelisa, we need to follow up on this conversation, is that part of the reason insulin, it makes no sense for it to be so expensive, is that it's not developing. It's like a generic at this point.
It's the same, correct. And what's sad is that when it was invented, it was actually donated because of the life-saving qualities that it had. The inventor of insulin actually donated it to be used for individuals that needed it. Now he's passed, of course, so someone else took it over, and now they're profiting off of it. And some insurances do cover. However, they limit, because the prices have gone up so much, they limit to only getting the generic brand, which have a different make. and the body needs to be readjusted when you're switched onto a different medicine. And truly, sometimes the bodies don't react the same way, and I can speak from experience about that. When my insurance, when I was in between insurances, my new insurance basically told me, we can't cover the prescription that you've been on for 20 years. Now you need to go on something else. My body can't do that. So I had to fight and get the help of the Pennsylvania Health Law Project to be able to get my secondary insurance activated, and for my public welfare office to be able to recognize that I am a disabled individual if I don't have my life-sustaining medication. I can't go 24 hours without having insulin before I end up in a hospital. It's just not an option. It's not like something, that you take to feel better because you have heartburn or because you have a headache. No, you will die. And people are just playing with people's lives only to make profit, which is very, very sad.
Yeah, Melissa, two questions before we let you go. One, very important, and then one we're going to bring on Yaya, have a little fun, and then before we bring our special guest. But that, Melissa, for people that are watching and saying, you know what, I'm feeling what Melissa's talking about, I'm feeling what Yaya's talking about. We gotta get, especially insulin, but so many of these medications, a more reasonable price. We need to work on so many parts of healthcare, because oftentimes the healthcare debate's about health insurance, but there's so many other issues related to it in terms of access to care, culturally competent care, access for all the different populations within our community. So what can people do to support your movement to lower prescription drugs? I know I'm doing some of that work nationally, and again, I want to connect with you soon on it, but let people know, give them one thing they could do. If they're a mother of a diabetic child, if there's someone that has an elderly, parent that needs heart medication that also gets expensive, let people know something they can do to take a step to get more involved in health advocacy.
Well, definitely, it would be reach out to your congressperson, and you can find it. You can Google congressperson, and I believe it's .gov on that. Find your congressperson.gov, and I can confirm that website. And then the other part is reaching. If you live in the state of Pennsylvania, Health Law Project, these are lawyers on your behalf will pull out the book on your local county office and speak on your behalf and get you the medications, the health insurance, whichever tiers, and you know that, through medical assistance. So whichever you fall into, they will get it for you, even if you are employed and have insurance through your employer. They will get you that secondary insurance if you need it. And if you don't, or if you're in between insurances, if you're pregnant, if it's for anyone of 21, they will guarantee insurance, whether it's on the trip or whether it's medical assistance, depending on your income. And then, of course, get involved in the community. Learn more about what's going on within your neighborhoods. For example, here in Allentown, I have the Unidos Foundation, and we just did it was called Barbecue and Arts, and it was really Q&A about health. We had different nurses there that were speaking to individuals about how to help them with that gap, how to pay for their co-pays, how to help them get to their doctor's appointments. They give bus passes, and all the donations that we received during that event were going straight to the parish nurses of Sacred Heart in St. Luke's here in Allentown. And that's just one of the organizations that helped.
Well, yeah, Melissa, you have really hit a chord with the Found Translation audience. Brianna Cortez noted that $3,500 a month.
Actually, my sister speaking on the behalf of my niece's page, I think.
Oh, okay, wonderful. So obviously, I mean, there's so many harrowing stories, and it's good to see that despite that nonsense that man was spewing, someone and a lot of hope you were bringing to that occasion. And if we had more time, I can only imagine being there and seeing him lie and all the tension and everything else. It must have been, but you were there for history. You represent for us very well.
Yeah,
it must have been pretty infuriating. So, Yamelisa Taveras, one last question before we get to our next segment. Sure. Yaya and Yamelisa, two strong Latinas. I think about two strong Latinas made a very big statement at Super Bowl Sunday. We're still talking 4 days later about Shakira and J-Lo. And there's been a lot of interesting discussion at La Mujer because there's been the girl power was great. There's someone like, they were a little trashy, a little too shaky booty.
Hey, where's my pen? There it is.
The pole was too much. So let's throw you, Yaya. Let's start with you, Yaya. What did you think about it? Talk to me. We got to make it fast, but just some quick
I'm so exhausted with the shenanigans about people saying it was perverse, it was too sexy.
Ay, Dios mío.
What were they wearing? I'm sorry. Your cheerleaders have half of their genitals exposed when they're on the field.
Your kids are on TikTok. I mean, come on.
You're on TikTok. You're supporting a sport that people are literally crashing their skulls into one another, and you're upset because of the dancing and it's inappropriate. I call shenanigans. I don't care. Shakira and J-Lo looked amazing. The next morning, I got on my bike and biked an additional 15 minutes.
Beautiful.
If that is not motivation for you to stop making excuses, then I can't tell you what is. Okay? And people
a great moment for women over 40. I mean, unbelievable, right?
This is terrible. Honestly, I want to see those of you who think it is ridiculous. I want to see you try to do one routine on a pole. If you can hold yourself up on that pole for more than 2 seconds, I will be shocked.
You know, as a man, I'll be honest with you. At that moment, I really saw it as more of a physical, artistic expression than sexual, because first of all, she had clothes on head to toe, it was tight, but it's not like she was even showing skin. And like you said, that's such a physical, artistic moment, and the height she was on and everything that I saw it that way too. Anyway, Yamelisa, what your thoughts? Let's get Yamelisa's thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, anyone will find anything to say when it's a female, regardless of race.
Haters are going to hate.
As a Latina, we are beautiful. We need to be proud of every part of our bodies. And the reality is they were not looking to be, inappropriate. They were looking to show up their skills, their amazing bodies, and the fact that they're artists. These are performing outfits. We get spoken about our hair, and that was, as we were like earlier, moving our afros around. The reality is to be proud being, Latinas, and the blend of, the Taino culture and the African culture and the colonists that came
that's right.
And
that's right. That's why we look this way.
Grateful and excited. And one of the things, going to the State of the Union with my hair as it is, and being proud of
Hands up, girl. That's what's up.
I did not go in there, and went to the salon and got my hair straightened. Absolutely not. I went with my natural curls, wore my crown very proudly. And, I am an American, regardless of whether I was born here in the United States or not. America is a lot bigger than the United States. So for those that want to bash, the beauty of Shakira and of J-Lo, they can go ahead and take that wherever else. There are, over 50 years of the Super Bowl, and many years have there been inappropriate things, and not one thing has been said.
Bottom line is it's Thursday.
People
are still talking about it.
Yeah, because it's actually the most viewed Super Bowl halftime show.
Absolutely. Well, they know the market. We got Bad Bunny, J Balvin
are spiking. Haters gonna hate, but they're laughing all the way to the bank. So I get.
Oh, that was the whole thing, right? Like, J-Lo's on her private jet. She's flying over Becky in Nebraska that's hating. So that's the way it goes. Yeah, Yamelisa Taveras, promise me you're not gonna make this the last time on the show. Please keep us posted on the lower.
Thank you, Yaya. You are beautiful. You're amazing.
Likewise.
Listening to you, Ray. Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure, and I'm very, very happy that I was able to represent our community at the State of the Union this year.
You did a fantastic job. You represented us well. It's such an important issue. Our community. We hear more about it in our political discussions nationally, and there's something we could do about it. We could just pass this darn bill and move the process forward and lower it a little bit. It has a long way to go, but we need to do a live show from the Lehigh Valley. So you find us a spot, and we'll get up there. We need to do a show with Tatiana and all our friends up in the Lehigh Valley. So Yamelisa Taveras, a fantastic healthcare advocate who represented for us in the middle of all that nonsense. Shakira,
amazing, honestly,
unbelievable. This lady, I mean, she did God's will. She represented for us so well, and it's such an important issue that impacts our community. Shakira, set us up for the next segment, and in honor of Black History Month, we represent for our Blackness and African Americans 365 here on Found Translation. Our brothers and sisters, our hermanos y hermanas, but in particular, Shakira is going to shout out throughout the show some prominent Afro-Latinos and Latinas that have made a big impact on all of us during Black History Month.
Yes. Let me get this page up. I had all my notes. There we are. So we have Julia Constanza Burgos Garcia, hailed from Carolina, Puerto Rico. Woo, woo. From Puerto Rico to New York to Cuba, Julia felt in many places her poetry addressed themes of feminism and social equality. Her dynamic poetry profoundly influenced many Afro-Caribbean writers who came after her. By age 19, she graduated from the University of Puerto Rico with a teaching degree. And let me tell you, it has been so rewarding to just read up a little bit about the African diaspora in Puerto Rico. I'm super excited because it's so important for us to embrace our Afro-Latinidad, something that I feel has gotten lost along the way due to the unfortunate circumstances of colorism. So yes, shooting out Julia Constanza Burgos Garcia. So I'm super pumped to, shout out a legend. So,
Julia the Burgos, not only one of our great Afro-Latina poets and one of the greatest figures in Puerto Rican Latin American literature, but someone that really was an icon for women empowerment and what she would write about in terms of her surviving a very tragic life, frankly. I mean, that's why she passed away at a young age, relatively young age. I think she passed away in her 50s. And years later, much of her writing was found as they, collected her things.
She died at 39. She died at 39.
Wow. Yeah, no, she died very tragically. So someone that we continue to honor here on Found in Translation. Want to remind people before we introduce our very special guest.
So you can subscribe to Found in Translation Talk Show anywhere. You can download to podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Radio Public, Pandora, Spotify, or YouTube. Try to say that all in one sentence. Giving up the podcast, a 5-star review helps us to spread the message of Ray and his amazing team, which includes yours truly. So be sure to share, tell all your friends, tweet your friends, message your friends, call your friends, TikTok your friends, Snapchat your friends. Be about it.
No, and maybe more reviews. Yashir will come back more than once every 9-10 months. The Sade of Found in Translation.
Don't do that to me.
Shara, I'll tease you another time. Thank you for the shout out. Thank you for keeping Black History Month top of mind throughout the show. Thank you. I want to bring on this young man because let me tell you something. We go the extra mile here because we set this young man on the side. People are like, Puerto Ricans, they advocate in Orlando. They go to the Bronx. They have a little event in the Bronx. Maybe something on the beach in Miami. And, of course, Puerto Rico. And, of course, all of our thoughts and prayers todavía with the people impacted by all these tragedies that have impacted the island, but particularly these latest ones. We still have people in parking lots and sleeping outside because they're fearful to go back in their home on the south shore of the island. But we got Puerto Ricans stepping it up, taking it to the next level, going to Iowa to infuse the issues related to Puerto Rico and into the Iowa Caucus presidential discussion and to discuss this harrowing journey that him and a group of Puerto Rican leaders just went through, going to the cornfields of Middle America. From Power for Puerto Rico Coalition, Frederick Velez III.
Hi.
Bienvenido, hermano.
Hi, thank you for the invite.
Buenas noches. Yeah, I mean, my man went the extra mile. It's easy to go to Chicago. You know what I'm saying? Si mándeme a Las Vegas, Washington.
Yes.
Yo me fui a Orlando, diciembre, no problem. I'll go to whatever meeting you want. So Frederick, let people know you're a Puerto Rican activist. I believe are you based in Florida or are you based in Washington?
I'm based in Miami. I lived in D.C.
So that's what
Qué buena vida tiene, ¿verdad? Tengo papá. So Frederick and his group of Power for Puerto Rico, much love to Javier Cuevas and all of our friends there, Power PR Coalition. Tell us about how this all started. So you and a group of Puerto Ricans decided to go to Iowa to infuse the discussion around Puerto Rico in the Iowa Caucus. Tell us around this incredible journey that you guys just went through.
So this actually started in May of last year when the coalition decided that we needed to step up our game with presidential candidates. After the last 3 years, we've seen that if there's something that Puerto Ricans have understood is that the presidency affects Puerto Rico the most of any U.S. jurisdiction. We don't have representation in Congress. We have one person who doesn't have a vote. We don't have a congressional delegation in the Senate. And if Trump has made something very clear is that with the wave of a hand, he can make our life very difficult. So the coalition decided that we were going to start asking presidential candidates to show us their Puerto Rico policy. So this started back in March of last year, and we started talking to and engaging the different campaigns in different ways. But then when it came to December, we saw that, at the end of the day, not a lot of campaigns had actually published their Puerto Rico plan. So our next step was just showing up. And we said, what's going to be crazy? You know what? They're definitely not going to expect a couple of Puerto Ricans in Iowa. I'm still defrosting. It was definitely really cold out there. But I can say that it was a really great experience, and we were able to connect with people that had never talked about Puerto Rico, and that had really real questions about, what our political status is, why we can vote for president, what we're thinking about the different candidates. So it was kind of eye-opening that, when you think of Iowa, you think of flyover country. But when Iowans think of Puerto Rico, it's kind of like the same feeling, So they were talking about us and saying, hey, you know what? It's not fair that candidates only talk about Iowa every 4 years when they need their vote. It's also not fair that candidates talk about Puerto Rico whenever there's a natural disaster, and they're not part of the greater conversation. So it was a great experience. It was really amazing.
I know, Shakira, when you heard about this story, I know you were so curious to learn about just their experience, just not only being in this exotic location, but also in the middle of this political theater with the Iowa Caucus.
So yeah, we're still waiting for the results, which is kind of funny. When a couple of activists were going there, we were kind of like, someone was saying that this is kind of like the political nerd Super Bowl. So a lot of us, follow politics, and we were like, oh my God, we're gonna be in Iowa at the moment that one of them wins, but we didn't actually get to go to any victory party. So that was interesting as well.
So break down, like, how many people was it? What did you do when you went there? Like, were you at the caucuses? You were looking to try to talk. I saw you talked to Pete Buttigieg. I saw that.
Yes.
So break down. What was the itinerary? How did you position yourself to expose the issue? Because you got a lot of media out of this. Yeah.
So one of the first things that we looked at is like, okay, so if we're gonna go to Iowa, let's make sure that we go to the place where we can have the biggest impact. So we started looking at Des Moines. We saw that the Iowa Democratic Party had rented the Wells Fargo Arena. So we thought, hey, this might be a really big place for us to go there. So a group of 10 people drove from Chicago actually the day of the caucus. But the day before, we had about 5 people come from Chicago. We had someone come from Minnesota. I myself I traveled from Miami. Our director also traveled from New York. And we kind of like huddled together and started looking at the different events and things that were going to be happening the day before. So one of the first things that we did is we found out that there's this coffee house where a lot of campaigns go to. So we ended up going there to grab coffee, and we ran into Joe Walsh, one of the Republican candidates, and we talked to him. And then that very same day, we went to Fuerza Latina at the Drake University, and we spoke about our campaign and what we're doing, and we kind of engaged those students as well. And then we found out that there was a Bernie Super Bowl watch party. So we went there and also spoke with all the people that were there. We handed out this literature that we came out with, which is basically comparing or telling Iowans that really Iowans and Puerto Ricans can't afford a president that doesn't have a plan, especially after the flooding that happened in Iowa in 2019 and the natural disaster that happened in Puerto Rico. So kind of connecting that as well. And then you were talking about the Pete Buttigieg encounter. So that happened out of the blue. We found out the ENPR was going to be recording the morning show in that coffee house the next day at 4 a.m. So we woke up at 3 a.m., went to the coffee house, talked to a couple of people, handed out flyers. And then when we were about to leave, we found out that Pete Buttigieg was coming in for an interview. So we obviously, stayed and actually captured a moment when we were asking him about his natural disaster plan. And he looked uncomfortable when we asked that question. So basically what we found out is that we just have to show up and these opportunities will happen. It was something that was definitely planned, especially the part where we were giving out coffee in front of the caucus and passing out the literature. We actually got Alto Grande coffee from Puerto Rico donated for this.
Oh, that's
yeah, so it was something that was really unique.
So my question is, though, like you said, Puerto Rican coffee, but I have 2 questions. Did you see any Puerto Ricans that were from Iowa? Because I'm so curious about that. And my second question is, how is there a way that Puerto Ricans can get more engaged, not only for what you're doing at Power for Puerto Rico, but just in general? Because you did mention showing up. You did mention when these opportunities arise, you have to show up. But for those of us who live this life, we kind of just know, but we have to kind of peel it back. For people that are just watching this today and hearing it for the first time, how can they get involved?
Of course. So in terms of the first question, when we were looking at data, we realized that there's about 8,000 Puerto Ricans in Iowa, which for us was amazing. But even more amazing is that there's a Puerto Rican restaurant in Des Moines. We actually went there to eat. The owner's called Monica. She was amazing. She actually, opened up the restaurant the day of the caucus when she was closed, just so that we could actually brew the coffee there. She lent us a table. The food was amazing. I mean, having a mofongo in Iowa, it's something really special.
That's amazing. The question is, what kind of mofongo, real quick?
Well, I mean, everyone had the sample. We had someone do the shrimp mofongo. I had the mofongo with carne frita, and someone did the pernil one. You have to sample everything.
Oh my God! When I get off the plane in San Juan, I go straight to a place. I forget the name of it. It's on the Condado, where I get the mofongo con camarones. Ay, Dios mío!
Yeah,
it's heaven. So I think it's really important. And we're talking to Frederick Velez III, very formal guy. I like that name. Frederick Velez III and Yaya Rivera talk about the advocacy that Power for Puerto Rico, Power for PR is doing. It's going to continue to do, but in particular, they took it the extra mile to go to the Iowa Caucus as a fracaso, which we've been discussing. But you're bringing up something very important, Frederick. I want you to lay out some principles up, because you're when you talk about the presidential candidates, and some have had pieces of it, laying out a Puerto Rico plan. There's obviously the obvious thing that most people would think of, the recovery stuff. But that is just one piece of a larger puzzle. Can you share a couple of the pillars that all of us need to be, not just Puerto Ricans, but especially Puerto Ricans, as we're evaluating these presidential primary candidates and any candidate, because there's also the members of Congress, people running for Congress and the Senate, need to be looking at a comprehensive plan for the island of Puerto Rico. So what are some of the pillars of that plan that you and your team at Power for Puerto Rico are looking to get commitments for from these presidential federal candidates during this cycle?
So before I go there, I just want to go back to the question that I feel is really important, which is how can people get involved? So in terms of what we're doing, there's a lot of organizations on the ground that are doing the work. We're a coalition of this organization. So part of what we do is that if you go to powerforpuertorico.com, you can actually see the events that the organizations are doing, as well as on their social media. But what I would tell people is that we sometimes just have to sit down in front of the computer and maybe make a Google search, or look at the different events and radio shows and TV shows that are happening, and just take some time to sit down. And I know it's not easy. I know that after coming up to work, I know that after facing all the different troubles and having 2 jobs and 3 jobs and having to take care of your kid, it's hard to not sit down and decompress and just watch Netflix. Look, I get it. I do it. But at the time that we're living is a really dangerous time, and we all need to chip in and make sure that we're questioning these congressional candidates and these presidents about these platforms. And that's why we came out with the Choose Your PR Policy platform, which you can look up in prpolicy.org. So what we basically did is we compiled the different legislative priorities that our organizations have in our coalition that we feel will make sure that Puerto Rico is rebuilt in the way that it needs to. So we're talking about a Marshall-type plan in terms of rebuilding, because just because we liberate funding, it doesn't mean that there's a plan behind what we have to do, right? We're talking about federal funding parity in different programs like the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit that doesn't apply to the island, so that there are some tools for economic development. We're talking about finding a long-term solution for Medicare funding. Puerto Ricans always have to go every 2 to 4 years to Congress to ask for an extension of Medicaid funding. And that doesn't allow for long-term planning, which is curiously something that Republicans have been using to withhold funding, right? So that's kind of what we're doing to make sure that not only people understand that it's not enough to court Puerto Rican votes and say that they're going to do good by Puerto Rico, but that they actually have to come out with a plan. Because how can we hold people accountable and elected officials accountable if they don't tell us from the beginning what their plan is for Puerto Rico? So that's part of the job that we're doing, making sure that we can hold them accountable.
I would mention 2 things on that, because again, and this has been, you're a younger man than I am, Frederick, but in watching this and caring about the island as part of the diaspora for a long time, and my family for multiple generations, is that typically in presidential campaigns, the most you would get out of them is, basically a comment about the status question, which is, well, Puerto Rico should get what they want. And, that would lead to basically binding plebiscites. And so what you're talking about is a much more comprehensive and really something prioritizes how do we stabilize the economy of the island? And how do we, not only, the obvious disaster relief stuff. I mean, to say you're not going to have a hospital in the island of Vieques for several years. I mean, there's just some obvious things there, but more, so as part of that, you laid out some very important things. I think two other pieces I think that are essential before you get into, way before you get into status questions, is this issue of the Jones Act and getting rid of the Jones Act. And if you can share just a quick summary of what that's about. And also the issue of the Fiscal Control Board, which you could do college classes on, but essentially is become a federal government middleman, and basically is the board that controls the island. Essentially, really, the governor and their powers are very limited. So can you talk about how some of those other pieces should be part of this conversation on the federal level as it relates to Puerto Rico policy?
It's funny. I would have never expected when this whole thing started that Bloomberg and Bill de Blasio will come out with the most comprehensive plans out of everyone. And even those plans don't mention the Jones Act. And the Jones Act is something that's really toxic with Democrats. And it's something that we're starting to look at, especially because it's going to be, this year is the 100th anniversary of the Jones Act. So we're starting to look at what they're going to do with that, because at the end of the day, if you look at all the studies, the Jones Act actually makes it more difficult for trade and goods to arrive to Puerto Rico, and it also makes it more expensive, right? So we're talking about the federal government making things harder for us when we need economic development.
And let me, if I could just jump in there, because I want people to understand that what Frederick just said is so important. So we live this because we have family members, and this even before the hurricane and all that, we would have to send them coffee because it was cheaper for us to buy the coffee here that was from Puerto Rico or Latin America and ship it to our family on the island. So the whole economic system is set up to have this huge, sales tax, basically.
So just a quick example. If the Dominican Republic, which is next to Puerto Rico, if we wanted to trade some goods between the islands, instead of the Dominican Republic, a ship just departing a Dominican port and going to Puerto Rico and making that short trip, it would have to go all the way up to a U.S. port, leave the things in that port so that they could be, they can get back into a U.S. ship, and then that ship would have to go to Puerto Rico. So that's just a quick example of how it makes things more expensive.
Thank you so much, Frederick, for coming on and all the work you do for our island of Puerto Rico. But my biggest question is, I always find myself in meetings, right, about how are we going to help Puerto Rico? How are we going to help Puerto Rico? There's so many organizations. But one of the things I've noticed is that there really is a trust factor that is missing, because there has been organizations trying to send goods and things to the island that never get to the island. FEMA isn't doing their job. So what is a way that we can instill trust in people and on our people to get motivated and encouraged to continue this battle? Because it really is it's literally is an uphill battle. I feel like we're always swimming against the current. And secondly, I've been told that most of the greatest impact is on the island, but how can we here on the States help? So I'm really excited to hear your answer.
So in terms of how we can help out the organizations out in the island, our solution to that was very simple. There are organizations, nonprofit organizations, that have been doing the work with Puerto Rican communities for decades. Yeah. We're talking about organizations like El Caño, and we're talking organizations that provide legal services, that provide health services. So what we did is, instead of telling people to reroute the money and the supplies to the different organizations that were popping up and were new and were kind of shady, to be honest with you. Yeah. We just came up with that list of organizations that we knew had been working for decades. And not only that, right now we're also hosting some meetings in Puerto Rico with those organizations, because part of the work that we're doing as a coalition here stateside is that we're engaging Congress, but we're not telling them what we are saying. What we're doing is that we're making sure that we're talking to all those organizations back in Puerto Rico, those grassroots organizations that are actually talking to the community. Because part of it is that sometimes organizations go to Congress and try to represent people that they really haven't talked to. And that's something that we've thought through and that we make sure, like, for example, Hispanic Federation, who's one of our coalition partners, have been doing a great work of doing a coalition and coalition building back in Puerto Rico, so we can find out what they need. And in terms of how stateside Boricuas and the diaspora can help out, I know this is what we've been hearing since 2012, but we have to vote. But not only do we have to vote, we have to actually get more involved in political system. And where I'm talking about getting involved is if you can make phone calls to get Boricuas out to vote, if you can ensure that your abuelita is registered and ready to vote, if you can make plans for your friends to go out to vote, if you can afford $5 to donate to your preferred candidate or your preferred organization, right? If you can volunteer some of your time to become a precinct captain, those are the things that we need. If there are electoral lawyers out there that are Puerto Ricans that are hearing me, we need your help. If there are people that are great at fundraising and that want to make sure that we are giving back to the candidates and to the elected officials that are helping us, and we need your help. And the list goes on and on and on, right? It's not only about voting, it's about making sure that we get more involved in the political process.
And it's interesting because you've hit on such an important point, Frederick, because this is on so many levels. What did Meek say? There's levels to this because there's, people, first of all, they look at the presidential lens. Point blank. If Puerto Ricans do our thing, this issue will be over. This monster will go away. If you just look at the Florida and Pennsylvania and Ohio Puerto Rican communities, just those 3 states alone, he goes away, but we have to do our part. Okay. And that's going to take a lot of work. That's talking about everyone taking responsibility, not just the one, little cousin you got that's volunteering at the community college. It's everybody's got to make a difference and make sure their neighbor, their spouse, and everyone in their sphere of influence is registered to vote. But it's not just about the presidential lens. Because at the end of the day, Congress controls the island of Puerto Rico. And obviously the president has influence and ultimately would sign off on whatever some of these things you're advocating for. But the Senate and Congress have to not only, there's a partisan element to that, but have to be held accountable for working on these issues that Frederick's talking about. So if, let's say, for example, you don't think you're in a major Puerto Rican community. Georgia has 2 Senate races this year. How many Puerto Ricans, how many people watching this right now, whether you're Puerto Rican, African-American, whatever, tengo una prima that's in the military in Fort Benning. Yo tengo un primo that's in Fort Benning right now in Georgia. Our homegrown Mia Mendez in Atlanta. I mean, we all got 5-10 friends that are in your phone right now that live in these. North Carolina has a Senate race, Arizona. Yeah. And not only are there Puerto Ricans there, but there's Puerto Rican leaders there that are engaged in community work that impact a lot of people. So we do a lot for other people. It's time for us to incorporate our policy platforms into these and show people that intersectionality. It just can't be the Puerto Ricans in Orlando and Philly. It can't. It has to be a national effort. And if you live, let me tell you something. If you live those Puerto Ricans in Iowa could have made the difference in that caucus. You talk about 7,000 Puerto Rican votes. I mean, that's poco vote. I mean, that is such a narrow race. That could be the presidential election in Iowa in November. It could come down to that. The Wisconsin Puerto Rican community, the Milwaukee Puerto Rican community, I was in, and we need to talk about that, Frederick, because I'm sure you're going to have a convention strategy. There's a Puerto Rican community there that would love to connect with you. So I want everyone to take a personal responsibility, what Frederick is saying, because it's not just about, okay, yeah, that's my cousin that's real, she's woke and she's active. No, we all got to do our part, and there's a lot of ways we can get involved. So, Frederick, give us a way that we can learn more about Power for Puerto Rico and a way we can support your efforts in promoting the Puerto Rican agenda.
So, of course, and before I do that, I just want to mention again what you said, and I just want to highlight it. Look, we have a growing community in North Carolina. We have a growing community in Georgia. We have a growing community in Texas. If I have $1 for every friend of mine who's not living in Austin or Houston, like I wouldn't be rich right now. Yeah. So part of that is not only making sure that we go out to vote and that we are counted, but it's also right now we're also going to get counted on the census, and that's something that's going to be huge too. That actually has the power to add more congressional seats to Florida and other places. So that's something that, again, if people are knocking on your door and are asking you to get counted on the census, please do it. It's really important as well. And then in terms of how you can find out more and how you can help us out, you can go to powerforpuertorico.com and you can see everything that we're doing. You can see our partners and you can learn more about them. And in terms of the campaign that we're going out right now for the presidential candidates, you can learn more at prpolicy.org.
So my quick question. I know that there's a lot of people who are now living in the States that are now transplants from the island because where they're living is no longer, or all these different terrible circumstances. But how many days does it take for you to live in the United States, right? For you to be able to change your residency so you can vote in local elections?
So that's really part of the problem. Especially when we come from Puerto Rico, most of the things like the Department of Education or other things are kind of like statewide. When it comes to elections, most of those rules are ruled by county procedures or by state rules. But in most places, they give you an option that when you apply for your driver's permit or when you apply for an ID, you should be doing in the first 30 days when you get there, you can get your license. Okay. Right. Part of what we're doing is we're asking anyone who has trouble registering to vote to let us know. So you can go on our Facebook page and you can let us know if you're having any trouble, because we are working with a lot of partners who work on voter registration, because we need to make sure that every single Puerto Rican is registered to vote and that they go out to vote on election day, no matter who you're voting for. That's the only way that we're going to make sure that we get more power, not only for the people stateside, but for the people on the island.
And it's about voting and also about letting your officials know, even if it's a state rep level, I'm a Puerto Rican issue voter, and these are the issues I want you elevating, because many of these things, thinking about a Florida or New York or New Jersey or Connecticut, we're never going to get things passed on the federal level unless we start bubbling up from the states and their state policies and statements and momentum. Look, 15 years ago, and that wasn't very long ago, not even 15 years ago, less than 10 years ago, the cannabis movement, the marijuana movement, that was thought of as like a fringe funny thing. Old white guys of Vermont like Bernie Sanders used to push stuff like that. Look at what the legalization movement has done. Mm-hmm. So this is a movement that can bubble up from our communities, and we have numbers. I mean, there's over 8 million Puerto Ricans between the island and the diaspora. And if you know a Puerto Rican, you got a lot of love for that person. So we have a large network of people that can support our work. Frederick Velez III, we're going to keep working together, brother. Let's definitely connect offline. And I want to definitely support you. And hopefully next few months I'll be getting to Miami so we can connect in person. And I can thank you for making this appearance over a mojito or something. So
please,
thank you.
Yeah. So that was Frederick Velez III. My man kicking knowledge. Unbelievable. My man. I mean, to think Yashira, him and his crew went to, you got to look at the social media stuff. It was a whole squad going to Iowa, making us proud. Aren't they making us proud?
Honestly, I really am. Thank you for Yamelisa and Frederick to come on today, because it motivated me too, because I've been at this outspoken game for quite some time, considering I come from a community where we are underrepresented.
Well, you're in love. You're in that honeymoon phase, girl.
Listen, it's not about honeymoon
phase.
You're looking at all
it's all rose petals and champagne in your life right now. Give it a couple years. Give it a couple years.
It's exhausting. It really is. I feel that, being Latina, self-identifying as Afro-Latina from a community that was very complex to, have this identity, right? Earlier, Yamelisa talked about how she was proud about wearing her afro in, the State of the Union. I mean, this is what's happening. Like, there's this beautiful evolution of, Puerto Ricans embracing our African roots and embracing who we are. And we're sick of
being proud about being Puerto Rican in a real authentic way. Because you always do it like in a flag waving, booty short, Betty Boop graffiti way. But this is think about how sophisticated our activism is. Mature. Look at this young man. Rising star in our community. Just thinking about the countless example. We got Puerto Rican women. We talked about in the show last week. We got multiple Puerto Rican women running for Congress in the Midwest, in places like Indiana, places like Kansas. We got Latinas running against the Texas conservative movement like Cristina Zinzun, Mexicana, tremendous person, going to run for Senate. I believe she's going to win that race. Yamelisa Gutierrez running against a Latino, but a Democrat, a name only a dude that doesn't do much for us down in South Texas, fighting a good fight. So many examples of people in our community stepping up to the plate. Our young boy, Andre Del Valle, in Philly running for state rep. I mean, there's so many positive people that are part of this movement, not just in the electoral political side. Think about our friends at Philly Boricuas. Think about Joel Belaco, National Puerto Rican. These are just our local buddies.
And also there's
that are making a difference.
Don't forget about LULAC and the new leadership in Rebecca Estevez.
I mean, the talent is there.
And I know it's not so much an idea of just being proud of who we are, because I know we're the most proudest people. We wear our underwear on Puerto Rican Day Parade is the Puerto Rican flag. Okay, I get it. But it's one of these things where we're starting to get more and more representation on every single level and leadership levels, which is most importantly, because when I was younger, there wasn't anybody who spoke like me, who represented the flag, and now seeing it is incredibly refreshing and it's very admirable. So shout out to our two guests today for, really repping, and it's quite remarkable. So thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough.
No doubt. Janet Diaz, who I believe, correct if I'm wrong, Janet, I believe she's on city council in Lancaster, and I think she's running for state senate in Lancaster. I could be wrong about that, but correct if I'm wrong on those titles. But Janet Diaz chimes in from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We need to support our Latinos that are running for office. No question about it, Janet. And if you have, we'll stay on a few minutes. If you want to jump on webcam on your phone, I just put the link in the chat so you can shout out some of the stuff you do in Central PA. We have a lot of friends. There's multiple Latino friends. I don't want to get into names because there's a few buddies of ours running in Reading, but they're good folks. So, yeah, Janet, jump on, girl. We'll stay on you. While we wait for Janet, why don't you, Yashira, mention we wanted to note another prominent Afro-Latino that we wanted to celebrate here during Black History Month?
So I have a bunch, but I'm going to do kind of a rapid fire of a couple and speak about one specifically, if that's cool. But I have Felipe Luciano. I have Silvia de Villar. I have Gwen Ifin. I have Jose Celso Barbosa. I have Piri Tomas. I have so many miraculous people, but the one person I wanted to hit on today, because I was literally wearing his pin and I switched it out for my Afro-Boricua pin. We're going to talk about Roberto Clemente, y'all. As a baseball fan, as a person who loves the sport. No, I am a Yankee. I'm a Pirates at heart because of number 21, Mr. Right Field, one of the best, who died very tragically doing something he loved, which was giving back to the community, unfortunately. But honestly, I just have to say that for those of you, I am going to put on my social media the list of the people I just rattled off, because it's so important to learn our culture. It's so important to learn those who paved the pathway for us to even have a voice. In recent weeks, I had explained to people why we're so proud about our flag, because there were times in our history where we were being executed for even having.
Are you talking about that Cuban flag that J-Lo had on that?
Oh my God!
On her fur.
We have been a part of the United States long enough, y'all. I'm gonna need you to understand the difference.
But that's that ignorance, that's it's so sad, Janet Diaz for PA State Senate. Yes, Janet, you are. Jump on, Janet. Give us a shout out. But and we really appreciate people giving their thanks to the show. But I think it's so important because I want to go back to Super Bowl for a second, and I'm glad that it got love. But we have to promote this, is that although, people say, oh, so many great, all these Latino rhythms, they said there's salsa, they did cumbia, all these rhythms, these are all African rhythms, my friend. Yeah. And so even though the face of it are women of color, not necessarily black women, depending how you want to define that, is that even though, you're kind of putting a lighter face to the culture, it's still at the heart and the soul Black culture. And it was very interesting. I thought you shared that, and obviously this overlaps with the African influence. Yeah, but I didn't realize. I knew Shakira's background. Shakira's name is Shakira Mubarak. She's of Lebanese descent. Yeah, but that how many of the dances and some of the, some of her performance was in relation to her Arabic culture, and so a lot of her Arab American fam was really feeling connected to that moment as well. So, look, we're all family when it comes all down to it. And all we're trying to say is, that our multicultural flavor at the end of the day is just as American as those wonderful people in Iowa. I got love for the people in the Midwest in the way that we should respect their heritage and their culture. They should respect ours, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans and we're all part of this country.
And the one thing that I want to, you hit the nail on the head on many things there, Javier, but just because we add a little bit of sazon and adobo and sofrito to dancing doesn't make us any less American. Because people are like, well, they're American, but they're Puerto Rican American. No, we're a part of this country.
No, they're not saying that, though. That's the problem. And that's the problem, is that it really is about, just think about how much animosity there still is to Colin Kaepernick. And just any woman, whether it's the Squad or Pelosi ripping a piece of paper, or, just any woman that speaks truth to power. These people are literally ripping our country apart, and we're supposed to not react. We're not supposed to go through the normal, accountability structures of our Constitution, do impeachment. And he was, he's totally ripping, And there's some, and on some level, it's what's that phrase? There's a famous, I think it's Churchill, one of these famous political figures says, we get the country we deserve, because at the end of the day, the senators and these other bad actors they're acting because they're kind of weenies and they're scared of Trump. But part of it is the people that they live with still are down with this. So, this is a real critical time in our history where we have to not only fight politically, but we have to stand up to who we are. And we're going to say, you know what, just because, I don't speak English with an accent doesn't mean that I'm not any less of a human and have rights than those kids that are still in those cages. Or, the young black male that lives in a different zip code that gets roughed up a little extra because nobody's going to say nothing. He lives in the hood and nobody's going to keep track of him. There was an issue in Orlando. There was one in Austin. There's still these issues, these police issues that happen and these policies. You can go on and on. Yashira, it was so great to have you back, my friend. Any final words for our Found Translation community as you hopefully don't sign off for the 2020, because that is the possibility we're scheduled.
So thank you so much, Rafael, as always, for having me on. Thank you so much to our guests today, Yamelisa and Frederick. I mean, you guys are so admirable. I thank you so much for all the support and helping our communities thriving and really taking, this extra to continue fighting at times where, the resilience that you're showing for sure. The one thing I do want to share is that, during your little speech there, Rafael, you were saying the importance of humanity. And I always feel myself saying this over and over again. You can't teach the fact that everyone is human, right? But you ought to treat people the way you want to be treated. I know it's cliche, but it's a fact. And there are days that I simply can't find the words because I'm just so frustrated that people can't think with a sense of empathy and compassion, but that's what we need. And of days of frustration when you feel like you don't want to go on anymore, that you want to lash out, that you want to talk back, just remember, like Michelle Obama says, when they go low, you go high. And you have to keep that sense of tenacity and respect for yourself to not stoop down to their level, because as long as we continue this good fight, we'll end up on top. So I feel like there's still hope. And I feel that
plenty of hope. Plenty of hope, because the reality is that there's more of us than any of these folks. And while we get frustrated by the politics of the day and some of these other issues, think about all the wonderful people just that were on the show today, not only on screen, but with the comments and the positivity, and people just are thirsting for this kind of information, this kind of solidarity, because they know in their own lives, well, look, I mean, even if we disagree on certain political things, that people are decent and really are, most of them, many of them, even that, kind of agree with this guy or with him on some, they're sort of embarrassed and don't know how to get themselves out of this whole situation because they feel like this Latino thing is going to overwhelm our country, and half the songs our kids listen to are reggaeton. So
I mean,
there's a lot of anxiety going on, and we need to address it, but we have to keep it real and be ourselves.
Yeah, and get over the fear, get over, if you're really that unsure about what it is to be Puerto Rican or how it is to be a person from a different background, instead of going in with a preconceived notion, simply just treat the person as another human being. Because guess what? You may think that you don't like what you saw Super Bowl Sunday, but that's because I'm positive you never had trifongo or mofongo or some of these amazing things that, and that's what
your daughter probably thought it was fantastic. I mean, that's the bottom line.
America is a melting pot.
Because they're interacting with our kids and our little cousins, and they realize, hey, they're just like us, and they cool, and they feel welcomed in our look. If you're in a mixed neighborhood, all the kids, the white kids, the black kids, hang out in the Latino household. That's just the way it is. So we got, I got all kind of white little cousins, because they used to hang out in the basement with my brother. And shout out to my brother and Marcus. Outer Space just came out with a new song. Crown, and you got to check it out on Outer Space Music's social media platforms, coming out that real hard hip hop. So this is this branding's part of that network. So Yashira, promise you come back in 2020 at some point.
Promise.
After you're touring Europe, you're European, because I know you like to jaunt to Europe for 3-4 months in the summer. Try to squeeze it in before your European vacation. Best to you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining Family Found Translation Talk Show. Please subscribe, download the podcast reviews, like, share it with your friends. We'll be on every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7% Central, 9 p.m. in Puerto Rico. Appreciate you, fam. We'll talk soon. Thanks. Peace.